I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, and this is Focus on Israel. That our children's textbooks are being used to indoctrinate our children with anti-Christian, anti-American, and anti-Semitic rhetoric. Did you know that Pearson Publishers, the world's largest textbook publisher, hired an editor who is, and I quote, waging a bloodless revolution in American schools? On this edition of Focus on Israel, we'll expose you to a subtle and malevolent war for the minds and souls of our children. Hello, I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore. Following the horrific attacks on 9/11, I began to ask, like most Americans, what happened to our country? As I researched and talked to experts, the issues of radical Islam and the attacks on America and Israel became extremely important to me. In response, I founded Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating Christians about their biblical responsibility to stand with and for the people and land of Israel. I established PJTN as a powerful Christian voice for Israel in the media, using my years of experience in broadcasting and film. Christians were, for the most part, silent during the first Holocaust. I believe we cannot be silent again. Little did I realize I would end up fighting anti-Semitism in my very own backyard. Our county has a long tradition of conservatism, a county in the very center of the Bible Belt, a county where Christians should not stand by in silence. I discovered that behind our backs, a liberal school board agenda had taken hold and was indoctrinating our children. Several controversial incidents and troubling educational materials raised a red flag. In November of 2012, a concerned Williamson County parent and PJTN watchman contacted PJTN about a controversial human geography textbook being used in her son's high school. The immediate concern involved a section under the title, Terrorism by Individuals and Organizations. It asked students to consider the following question about why terrorism has increased. The quote is, "If a Palestinian suicide bomber kills several dozen Israeli teenagers in a Jerusalem restaurant, is that an act of terrorism or wartime retaliation against Israeli government policies and army actions?" When an anti-Israel handout and a guest speaker in his class influenced her son to even question his faith and the accuracy of the Bible concerning Israel, she contacted me. It was also discovered that another student had remarked that had he not taken the class, he wouldn't have known about the dangerous Zionist agenda. Meetings with the school's faculty led nowhere, so I filed an official complaint with the school district requesting the textbook's removal due to the highly objectionable statement. With the help of other concerned parents, nearly a dozen other objectionable passages, descriptions, and word choices were also found in the book. Not only was the textbook anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, but it was replete with anti-Christian, anti-Western, and pro-Marxist propaganda as well. Despite gathering over 1,200 signatures protesting the book, parents' outcries, and repeated school board meetings, Williamson County Schools Director Mike Looney told the board to vote to continue using the book. Looney defended the use of this textbook and stated, "I personally don't get that anti-Semitic perspective from reading the question in context. I respect other people's viewpoints and understand they might read it differently." The Nashville Jewish Federation supported us on this matter and agreed that the textbook needed to be removed and issued this statement: "To create moral equivalency between specific acts of terror and legitimate territorial disputes that are political in nature, serves to legitimize wanton and premeditated violence against innocent civilian victims. To further allow distorted, unbalanced, and prejudicial content to stand as a form of academic inquiry is a perversion of our educational system and a disservice to all the children who learn in that system. In October 2013, I took the issue to the Tennessee State Legislature, where my advocacy against anti-Semitism is well recognized among the state's legislators. In a state that has passed several strong pro-Israel resolutions, legislators shared my concern about the material being presented to students. I testified before the Tennessee Senate Education Committee to address the concerns about this textbook material. This testimony was instrumental in the Tennessee legislature introducing bills related to textbook issues. Fox News, as well as other national and international media, picked up on the story, covering it for almost 2 weeks, and pressure was brought to bear on the Williamson County School Board. The timing of the campaign was perfect, as many school districts were preparing to make their textbook purchases. National and international media attention was focused on Pearson publishers. After numerous attempts were made to get a statement from Pearson concerning the bias in the textbook, Pearson quietly conceded and decided to pull the anti-Semitic statement from its future editions. What a coup. In the past year, Pearson, whose revenues from the U.S. market comprise 60% of their total revenue, has announced a significant decline in revenue and subsequent layoffs. Such educational materials expose a subtle and subversive campaign going on throughout this nation to rewrite history and promote values that threaten the future of our country. In this excerpt from the award-winning documentary Disinformation, you'll learn more of how our educational system has been hijacked and our unique history is being rewritten.
The lies have been allowed to become history, to become truth. But what is truth? What is history? Without understanding the outrageous and uniquely Soviet tactic of disinformation, our worldview can become distorted. Even today, progressives are subtly repackaging the communists' ideas and legacies and passing them on in the curricula of our schools, in the news media, in Hollywood films, on the internet, and on TV. Over the past several decades, American universities have grown into a hotbed of disinformation.
I'm very concerned about America. I feel this is not the same America that I discovered when I arrived here in 1980. I think the most dangerous source of evil brainwashing and propaganda is coming from Ivy League schools, top-notch schools. The only place on earth where people still believe in Marxism and Leninism and communism.
The only bulwark against disinformation is knowledge. And that's why the educational system is so important. And that's why the current American crisis really is based on the failure of our educational system and the takeover of the educational system by a single ideology. What I cannot stand and what really terrifies me about the country nowadays is that it's so monolithic. And people start saying, well, look at Obama. Where did Obama get all these crazy ideas from? I keep saying to them, look, Obama you can find 1,000 Obamas in chat rooms online or in dormitories, anywhere in our top universities. Just go in, guys sitting around drinking beer and talking. They'll talk just like him because he believes what they believe. They think the same way he thinks. All these slogans based on nothing.
Promoting Marxist ideas and approaches with no mention of the bloody legacy of these doctrines is the rule rather than the exception. College campuses are teeming with anti-America, anti-Jew, and anti-white rhetoric. A professor's job is not to tell students what to think. It is to help them to think critically and for themselves. Yet thousands of professors go to work every day with the intention of indoctrinating their students in their political prejudices. These supposed teachers have even included unrepentant terrorists Bill Ayers, Kathy Bodan, and Bernadine Dorn of the Weather Underground.
Secular universities in America, they are radically leftist, not liberal. Liberal is, my dad was a liberal. Okay, we're talking radical leftist. communist, socialist, Marxist, statist. They are learning things in colleges today that have nothing to do with the foundational principles of America and what made America and made those universities even possible.
Following the Boston Marathon bombing, Princeton University professor Richard Falk stated that the U.S. should not be surprised. After all, it supports Israel. Falk quoted a line from poet W.H. Auden: "Those to whom evil is done do evil in return." He went on to suggest that there will be more such attacks, especially if there is no disposition to rethink U.S. relations to others in the world, starting with the Middle East. Such teachers are now no longer confined to university campuses and college courses. In March of 2013, parents in Tennessee discovered their high school students were being taught disinformation from a human geography textbook. Among the many leftist statements and historical inaccuracies was a highly anti-Semitic question dealing with terrorism. The textbook states, "Distinguishing terrorism from other acts of political violence can be difficult. For example, if a Palestinian suicide bomber kills several dozen Israeli teenagers in a Jerusalem restaurant, is that terrorism or wartime retaliation against Israeli government policies and army actions?" In the recent case of the Boston Marathon massacre, carried out by two Caucasian Muslim brothers, one an American citizen, the question is asked, what could be the motivation? Looking at the liberal elite intellectual thought that infects the Boston community and schools might be a good place to start. The younger brother of the pair graduated from the celebrated Boston High School, Cambridge Rindge and Latin School, where he was daily taught anti-American disinformation. His history teacher, Larry Aronson, is a disciple of the raving, America-hating, revisionist historian Howard Zinn. He is taught from the Marxist anti-American history book by Zinn, A People's History of the United States, since 1981. If you don't know Zinn's contempt for America, here's a sample of his work.
Around 1776, certain important people in the English colonies made a discovery that would prove enormously useful for the next 200 years. They found that by creating a nation, a legal entity called the United States, they could take over land, profits, and political power from the favorites of the British Empire.
Zinn was a liberal elite darling who claimed his eyes were open to the racist, imperialist horror that is America by writer I.F. Stone. Stone was a prominent writer in his day, who later was confirmed to be a paid KGB agent when the Iron Curtain fell and certain Soviet documents became public. It is more than coincidental that his articles expressed the position of the Soviet Union on so many issues.
You got to remember there are two parts to disinformation. One is the message, it's a lie. It's meant to advance a certain agenda. Okay. The other part of that disinformation machinery is that the delivery vehicle for the message has to be credible, at least in the minds of the people receiving the message.
Let's put it this way, because it's pretty simple. The late Andrew Breitbart, who was a good friend of mine, said one thing: politics is downstream of culture. And he was 100% correct. By the time you get to the age of voting, your mind has already been filled up with right and wrong and this and that, so many other things that you're not seeing straight. And especially given that the educational system has been permeated by the left as well. So there's nothing more important than seizing the culture. And you're not going to do it in a day because it's really hard. But you got to do it step by step, and if you don't, it's over.
One large area of concern that we're seeing in many history and social studies textbooks and instructional materials is a subtle indoctrination of religion, and that religion is Islam. Many textbooks today not only often contain twice as much information on Islam than Christianity or Judaism, but also mention nothing about the destructive nature of Islam through past and present history. In many cases, the materials and textbooks are in direct violation of the U.S. Constitution by favoring one religion over another. Even more troubling is the approval of instructional materials that appears to have been published by a Muslim Brotherhood front group. The front group was designated in 2007 by the Department of Justice as an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial, the largest terrorist fundraising operation in the history of the United States. The trial uncovered a relationship between CARE, individual CARE founders, and an organization called the Palestine Committee. Evidence was also introduced during the trial that linked the Palestine Committee and Hamas, which was designated as a terrorist organization by the U.S. government in 1995. On November 15, 2014, the United Arab Emirates Ministerial Cabinet listed CARE as one of the 83 proscribed terrorist organizations with the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS. These instructional materials cropped up last month when parents from 2 school districts in Tennessee contacted PJTN regarding a PowerPoint being used in their child's classroom that was approved under the Common Core standards to teach 7th graders about the religion of Islam. Included in the presentation are multiple misleading statements, including that Muslims believe in the Judeo-Christian God, which they call Allah, that the Quran is God's last revelation, and the false concept that Jerusalem is a holy city to Islam. It also includes the Muslim prayer of faith, but mentions nothing about the negative aspects and actions of the religion. More recently, a 3rd grade teacher in another Tennessee school district handed out a graphic about Mount Rushmore to students that was created by Louis Farrakhan's Nation of Islam organization. Farrakhan is notorious for his anti-Semitic and anti-American comments accusing Jews of fueling and funding the black slave trade. The handout accuses George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln of equally egregious accusations. It is this type of disinformation that historically leads to violence against Jews and will ultimately lead to the downfall of our country. This type of blatant anti-Semitic, anti-Judeo-Christian, and anti-American propaganda and disinformation has no place in our public discourse, and it certainly should not be taught to our future leaders. We say we want our children to be able to think critically, but then we provide biased information that is inaccurate. As Americans, we do not pay taxes for our textbooks to contain inaccurate, biased curriculum that does not reflect the values of our country. Next up, you'll hear from Cynthia Dunbar, an American lawyer and author who served on the Texas State Board of Education from 2007 to 2011. She's a graduate from Regent University School of Law and recently taught at the Liberty University School of Law. Ms. Dunbar believes the separation between church and state in the U.S. is a myth, and in 2008 published a book, One Nation Under God, in which she argued that the United States was ultimately governed by the scriptures.
This is my cry to you all, because basically what I'm telling you is there's no easy solution. This is not a fix where you can go home and feel comfortable and say, we're going to pass some little legislation about the textbook review committee. Because I will tell you, I've dealt with all of those committees. It just comes in a back door, another way, another venue. Texas didn't even adopt Common Core, and you know what they did? They went through the regional support centers with the same woman who helped draft Obamacare, and they developed an online curriculum called C-Scope that cannot be viewed even through open records requests because it's copyrighted, so it goes around the loophole. And so the students in Texas that we tried to prevent this through our elected board, now 80% of the schools have bought into this where the parents don't even know, and a few of them are coming home saying, Mommy, did you know that the men who flew into the Twin Towers were freedom fighters? What does that say to us? It says from the federal government, from the Obama administration, from Arne Duncan and the DOE, we don't care what you want, parents and states. We know better, and we will tell you what your children will learn. It's really interesting, though, that none of their kids go to these socialized schools. Because the dumbing down factor, and believe me, it is dumbing down factor. When people say, oh, that's paranoid, I looked at the books from India that look like stapled together little pamphlets of nothing, and their math scores are going through the roof. While we have the big, what I call rainforest algebra textbooks with the glossy bindings and pictures, where the first 100 pages are multiculturalism and chili recipes. I'm not making this up. It's too good to make up. It's true stuff. So. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with a little bit of scripture, and then I'm going to leave you with a call. Okay, this is the message for tonight. I have set you as the watchman on the wall. It's that condemning difference of those who know the truth are accountable for the truth. If you see the sword of judgment coming, what is your responsibility? He doesn't say that if you warn, they're going to turn. Because he says, if you warn them and they don't turn, what happens? The blood's on their hands. But if you don't warn them, where's the blood? Isaiah 59, my hand is not shortened that I will not save, but I will not hear your cry. There was another time in history where we saw a warfare assault coming against us as a land. The battle lines were drawn. And I'm telling you, it is as bad or worse today than it was at this time in history, when the message was, gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is already raging. Why do we sit idle? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be bought at the chains of slavery and bondage? Forbid it not. Almighty God, I know not what other men may do, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Thank you, and God bless.
Our next informative piece is an excerpt from a new documentary on Common Core titled Building the Machine.
These are 45 states that have voluntarily come together to create fewer, higher, deeper standards.
The 5 people who didn't agree to sign the letter simply were expunged from the record.
The real issue in American education is that people without a whole lot of experience are dictating education policy.
I'm trying to think of something analogous to this that slipped through so easily on a national basis. I really can't.
Is the most meaningful reform of our public schools in a generation.
Common Core throw away their local standards. So I think just being straightforward, continuing to tell the truth is very important.
We had to sign a confidentiality agreement that we would not ever discuss what took place in the meeting itself.
Protest against Common Core.
It was controversial.
Race to the middle.
The biggest misconception that Common Core proponents push on people is that there is any evidence that a system like Common Core will benefit children.
It takes power from the parent. It de-incentivizes the parent from a deep and abiding interest in their child's education.
A Maryland parent
was arrested last week after speaking out about Common Core.
Don't stand for this. Right? You're sitting here like cattle. You have questions. You want them. They don't want it.
They're not accountable to the public.
What is the best case scenario that you foresee?
I don't see any.
Show us the most innovative plans to improve teacher quality and student achievement. We'll show you the money. We launched a competition called Race to the Top. And these standards were developed, by the way, not by Washington, but by Republican and Democratic governors throughout the country.
The Common Core is a project of 2 organizations in Washington, D.C.
They're trying to quantify everything, and this will make it all right. No, we'll be a nation where nobody's brilliant.
The people who support Common Core believe in elites and bureaucrats telling thousands of other people what to do.
You remember The Wizard of Oz, where he was a little man standing behind the big controls, but in this case, there isn't even a little man.
Make no mistake, Common Core is about indoctrinating our children into a leftist way of thinking, which includes destructive ideas such as the embracing of Islam and undermining the Judeo-Christian values this nation was founded on. Is it any wonder that states are rejecting and suing the federal government over Common Core? Common Core is just another weapon in the leftist war on our children. If our country is to be saved, then we must take it back, one small county, one small election at a time. As we have slept, the liberal agenda has penetrated every strata of our government and our educational system. It's a long road ahead, one we can no longer afford to sit idly upon. We are in a war for the minds and souls of our children. The textbooks being used to teach our children must be accurate, unbiased, and reflect our Judeo-Christian values. We must stand now and demand the removal of all inaccurate and controversial textbooks from our schools. I encourage you to ask your children to bring their textbooks home so you can review them. Many of the problem areas include history, geography, and social studies books, as well as health and sexual education texts. We have created a model that you can use in your community to confront this indoctrination. Please contact me directly at lauriecm@pjtn.org to let us know what you find and how we can help. You must realize that the time to stand up is now. Be a leader in your community and in your church. One person can make a difference. Get involved with and support pro-Israel organizations such as PJTN. Call your elected officials. Let your leaders hear from you. Visit our website to learn more. Sign up to receive free newsletters, action alerts, daily blogs, and order our films to share with family and friends. We'll see you next time on Focus on Israel.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, P.O. Box 682711, Franklin, Tennessee 37068. You can also support PJTN online. Visit pjtn.org or call 1-877-873-9020.
Anti-Semitism has reached epic proportions, and Israel is now surrounded by nations who seek its destruction. For Israel to lose just one battle would mean losing everything. As Christians, it is our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and Israel. PJTN needs your help to reach more Christians with this urgent message. Please visit our website to become a member today and order our award-winning documentaries. You must decide that you won't be silent. Sign up now at pjtn.org. God bless you and thank you for your support and prayers.